जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधाम। जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनारञ्जन। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन। यमुनतीरा वनचारि यमुनतीरा वनचारि। जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जनावल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जनावल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनार्दन। यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनार्दन। यमुनतीरा वनचारि यमुनतीरा वनचारि। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा गोपी जनावल्लभा राधा गोपी जनावल्लभा। जय निताय पतिता पावन गौर हरि। निताय पतिता पावन गौर हरि। प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सतहित डिवाइन ग्रेस सभय चरण अरविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सतहित डिवाइन ग्रेस शिशिल भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास रघुनाथ छठ गोस्वामी प्रभुगण की जय। प्रेम से कहो जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि श्री गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा गोपी जन वल्लभ गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय। मायापुर नवदीप धाम की जय। पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री कचक्र धाम की जय। श्री गंगा मैया यमुना मैया की जय। भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की जय। सामवेद गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glories to assemble devotees, all glories to assemble devotees, all glories to assemble devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Lord Sweet Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada की जय। ओम अज्ञातिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादां सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद नमः ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे राम 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 हरे मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्येश्वरम् ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय We are reading from Shrimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 31. Thirty-five. न तथास्य भवेन्मोहो बन्धश्चान्या प्रसङ्गता योषि सङ्गात् यथा पुंसो यथा तत्सङ्गी सङ्गता न तथास्य भवेन्मोहो बन्धश्चान्या प्रसङ्गतः योषि सङ्गात् यथा पुंसो यथा तत्सङ्गी सङ्गतः न तथास्य भवेन्मोहो बन्धश्चान्या प्रसङ्गतः योषित् सङ्गः तथा पुंसो तथा यथा तत्सङ्गी सङ्गतः. Synonyms: na, not, tatha, in that manner, asya, of this man, bhavet, may arise, moha, infatuation, bandha, bondage, cha, and anya, prasangataha, from attachment to any other object, yoshit, sangat, from attachment to woman, yatha, as, pumsaha, of a man, yatha, as, tatsangi, of men who are fond of women, sangataha, from the fellowship. Translation: the infatuation and bondage which accrue to a man from attachment to any other object is not as complete as that resulting from attachment to a woman or to the fellowship of a man who are fond of women. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Attachment to women is so contaminating that one becomes attached to the condition of material life, not only by the association of women, but by the contaminated association of persons who are too attached to women. So this is um, continuation of Lord Kapila describing what happens to living entity within the womb, and then how he suffers when he comes out of the womb, and then how he suffers in his initial ages. Then when he comes to boyhood, in the initial ages, he cannot communicate, his skin itches, he cannot itch his own skin also. So many torments happens, but he's in a helpless state and he cannot communicate. He simply suffers. Then when he comes to boyhood, he develops many desires, and many of his desires are not fulfilled. And he grew in a very restrictive environment, and he feels he is miserable. and he suffers there. And when he comes to youth, then he becomes attached to opposite sex, especially the year between, it is described from 13 to 30, the teenage year. Um, it is, although the attachment to woman never goes away, but that time it's very much prominent. And then Lord Kapila is describing about what is the how one becomes, like the previous verse yesterday. Our dear Rohinandan Prabhu, he was describing this verse where Lord Kapila says he becomes bereft of the science of self-realization, and he becomes a dancing doll in the hand of a woman. And here Lord Kapila is saying that there are many attachments in this material world, but the attachment to, but there is no attachment in this material world which is as strong as the attachment to woman. One time I was listening to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada was mentioning even those in renounced order, they also have a lot of attachments attached to their name and fame, attached to their, I don't know, there are many attachments are there, but none of the attachment can be compared to the attachment of woman. Attachment to woman is the strongest. Uh, Prabhupada also says if we are not, I mean, woman, Prabhupada, recently I was hearing a lecture, Prabhupada was mentioning woman is not about a class of people who are in a female body. Prabhupada says there is Prakriti and there is Purusha, and everyone in this material world is trying to become Purusha and trying to enjoy Prakriti. And Prakriti means to be enjoyed, and Purusha means Krishna. Although we know that there is only one Purusha, that is Krishna, we are all trying to become Purushas. I mean, different people have different inclination, how strong their desire is to become a Purusha. And then Prabhupada was mentioning whether it is man or woman, the attachment towards opposite sex is there, independent of which body we are in. When the lust is there in the heart, then we are naturally attracted to the opposite sex, whoever we are. Um, but just an example is given for a man to a woman. And here, so none of the attachment is as strong as when one becomes attached to a woman. It is seen that when people become attached to women, they become constantly kind of, their mind becomes absorbed with that, with the form of that woman. Um, Mahatma Prabhu says, till the time we become sufficiently advanced in Krishna, till that time we develop our attraction to Krishna. Attachment to one form of a woman will be prominent, and that one form will keep on changing. But there is always one form that every living entity becomes attracted to. One. Mahatma Prabhu was saying there are how many? I don't know. 8 billion people. We have no concern about 7 billion and 999 million and continue. But that one person, and that one person will keep on changing. The thing is, like Srila Prabhupada says, we can never, I mean, we cannot be detached from this material world unless we develop our attachment to Krishna. And this is what happens, is that one form keeps on changing, whether it's a male form or female form, whoever the opposite sex is. And that person, name and form keep on changing. But one attachment, somebody is in the mind, and somebody else is in the mind, and somebody else is in the mind, and somebody else is in the mind. That varies. But ultimately, like Prabhupada says, that is the reason that we exist in this material world. Prabhupada says when we are free from that desire to dally with the opposite sex, to, I'm not qualified to speak on this subject matter, but when we are free from that desire, that will arise only when we become attached to Krishna. Till that time, the mind is always trying to become attached to something, 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 something. And here in the first line, and Not only attachment to women, but attachment to a man who is attached, who is very attached to women, is even more contaminated. Um, or attachment to somebody who is attached to men or women, whatever form they are in. That association is also um, um, very contaminated. And also we hear this verse from Bhagavad Gita, Dhyayato Vishyankum Samsangateshu Pajayate. One contemplates, and as one contemplates, attachment develops. And same thing is there, that when we do not contemplate on the object of sense gratification, and when we contemplate on Krishna, then attachment will develop to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada says the life is full of choices. The mind is like Rupa Goswami has a prayer in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says, just like a man and woman are spontaneously attracted, let my attraction flow towards you. Um, and mind is not our friend. Krishna says mind is our worst enemy. But then mind needs to be trained. And that's why Krishna gives the solution of Man Mana Bhav Mad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. Think of me. But how difficult it is to think of Krishna. Because the thing is, thinking thinking of woman or man in this material world, or thinking of some material desire in this material world is very, very spontaneous. But thinking about Krishna is not natural to us. And because if we understand this is the cause of my bondage, this is the cause of my existence in this material world, then the solution that we try to follow is whenever any thought comes, if it is not conducive, we try to think of Krishna. We should try to think of Krishna. And that also comes with the first we have to sharpen our intelligence by understanding. First comes knowledge, the beginning. The beginning is hearing, like Srila Prabhupada would say. First comes knowledge. Yes, if I think about it, I'm lost. So then, then one should be, that's why Prabhupada said, one should be careful in one's practice of Krishna consciousness. Any thought comes, think about Krishna. And Prabhupada says, um, a living entity falls down because he has no understanding of the lotus feet of Krishna. But the thing is, when we are attached to this material world, it is very difficult to become attached to Krishna. We may not have any feeling for the lotus feet of Krishna, or for the face of Krishna, the flute of Krishna, or the form of Krishna. We don't realize it. Um, Krishna is there. Krishna is all beautiful. Krishna is all attractive. Anybody who sees Krishna once, he cannot think of anything other than remembering Krishna. All the source of all beauty comes from Krishna only. But even though we may not be attracted, if we are convinced at our intellectual level, this is a cause of my bondage. What is the difference between a sincere devotee and an insincere devotee? Insincere devotee gives into the mind. A sincere devotee tries not to give in and try to think about Krishna. It is not that attachment is not there. Attachment is there. I mean, when we are in a pure state of Krishna consciousness, there may not be, but attachment is there till that time. It may be of various degrees, but attachment is there. And um, when we try to think of Krishna, we will become attached to Krishna. There is, we were discussing the other time, these sons of Brahma, they asked this question to um, Swan Hamsa Avatar. And they said the mind and the sense object, they are very much intermingled. The mind enter into the sense object enter into the mind, and it seems almost impossible for the living entity to come out of this loop. And then Hamsa Avatar says, yes, that is true. And that's why then they ask, for sons of Brahma, they ask, how can we break that loop and come out and become free? How can we become liberated when mind and sense object are so intermingled? So how that state is possible from the state where mind and sense object are deeply intermingled? And Hamsa Avatar says the similar concept, that by always thinking about me, Can one break this loop? This loop is there, of attachment to one, from one form to another, and it doesn't really matter whether we are married or not, because even before marriage, maybe that particular form enters. After that, that form does not. I mean, what I have seen, the attraction at physical level does not remain. It's always service remains, and everyone is busy with their own dharmas in their ashram. But then something outside may come. Of course, devotees, they never go gross, but the thoughts are there, and that keeps us attached in this material world. And that thought one has to identify, and then one has to divert those thoughts and force one's mind to think about Krishna. If we are not careful, then it is described in Bhagavatam, the mind, natural tendency of the mind will cheat us. And Maya also attacks through mind. And we were discussing the other day about the false promises presented by the mind. Um, but there is no real pleasure there. And we deprive ourselves of the real pleasure which comes from our association with Krishna, from bhakti. We deprive ourselves from the real pleasure, and we start running behind the false pleasure, which which never leads to pleasure, only leads to anxiety. Um, the future verses also describe what are the dangers when one become attached to the opposite sex. Attachment to women is so contaminating that one becomes attached to the condition of material life. One become attached to conditional material life is when one becomes attached to women. He will not have a strong desire to become Krishna conscious, and he will. Um, I mean, he may practice, but he will not practice with that fire. Bhog, bhog, or attachment makes us weak. Um, Either we are driven or running behind this material world, or we are driven and running behind Krishna. Radheshyam Prabhu gives an example of a madhumakhi, a bee. A bee is so powerful that a bee can even make a hole if she tries with full effort, make a hole in the iron also. A bee is so powerful. But when the bee is in a lotus, sucking the nectar from the lotus, the bee becomes so intoxicated, so charmed by the nectar of the lotus, that the lotus closes and the bee dies. The bee can make a hole in the iron, and bee cannot escape the soft petals of the lotus, and bee dies out of suffocation, lack of breathing. So Radhesha Prabhu was mentioning that this is how the bhog makes us very weak. We see the similar example of Arjuna also, that he became very weak and he was shedding tears and quivering. And Krishna told Arjuna, give up this petty weakness of the heart. So we become very weak. One becomes attachment to woman is so contaminating that one becomes attached to the condition of material life, not only by the association of women, but by the contaminated association of persons who are too attached to women. There are many reasons for our conditional life in the material world, but the topmost of all such causes is the association of women, as will be confirmed in the following stanza. Many things can bind us, but this association with women, um, this is the strongest. This is the strongest. In Kali Yuga, association with women is very strong. In every step of life, there is association with women. If a person goes to purchase something, the advertisements are full of pictures of women. The physiological attraction for women is very great, and therefore people are very slack in spiritual understanding. Prabhupada says the reason people are not interested because they are interested in women or opposite sex, and that's why they are not interested in. I have personally seen, especially new relationship when like young boys and young girls, new relationship. Nobody is interested in Krishna consciousness. Old, they are interested, or um, a single, they are interested. Suffering, they are interested. But when there is, otherwise, there is a horde of desires, and one becomes very much external. Um, cannot, yeah, then it does not sink in. Prabhupada says. That Prabhupada says, therefore, people are very slack in spiritual understanding. And the Vedic civilization, being based on spiritual understanding, arranges association with women very cautiously. That's why even Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he was manifesting his pastimes, being the Supreme Lord himself, he was exhibiting how careful he was in his association with women. Scriptures also says this is a very strong statement, but try to understand in a positive way. Scriptures also says the form of a woman, or basically the opposite sex, the form is a form of Maya. Scripture says. Now, what does it mean? It's not, see, devotee women. If devotees women, they are sattvic. They and their goal is Krishna, and the purpose of sangha is Krishna. Devotees who come to Bhagavatam class, the purpose of sangha is Krishna. Purpose of sangha is to understand Bhagavatam. Very good. But when our intelligence, when our mind is becoming attached to a particular form, which is always one, and it keeps on changing, that particular circumstance is Maya is acting uh, in our life through that instance. That's why it is said, like Yugal Kishore Prabhu says many times in Brahmachari classes, he says, if any woman form is disturbing, maintain distance from them. In general, he says, Yugal Kishore Prabhu, he says, in general, um, interact only for service, especially those in renounced order, and those in not in renounced order. In Grahastha Ashram also, no free talk, no free intermingling, or phone calls, texting, one husband, another wife, freely. That is going to, because the thing is there is contemplation every step. There is one grahastha, mm, very famous, very strict grahastha, in Chowpatty. Mm. Anand Vrindavan Prabhu, I think, yeah, doesn't speak to somebody else's wife. The thing is, it doesn't matter. For the mind, doesn't matter who is whose husband, who is whose wife. It's just there is that illusory energy, that attachment is there. The attachment to the form is there. And if one contemplates, and it's so dangerous because the moment we let the mind loose, the mind will find attachment here and there. Um, and that's why the mind has to be restricted. This is called Vaidhi Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti means follow the rules and regulations. Because if we don't follow rules and regulations, naturally we are going towards an animal life. Prabhupada says hogs and dogs premix, but should not be done in a human form. Very careful. If we are not careful, we are set, like Prabhupada says, they will be bleeding if we are not careful in our spiritual life. And if you're not careful, how will we chant properly? How will we cultivate our Krishna consciousness? We can never come out of this thing. That's why there are so many injunctions, and that's why there is training. The men needs to get the men needs to be trained, the woman needs to be get trained, and the training is basically the training of the mind. So that is the basis of Vedic civilization. The free mixing was not there even among husband and wife previously. Even they were supposed to meet at a certain time, just because this this attachment is the strongest attachment. That's why it is said a prison without wall. Why? Because nobody want to escape. But the fact is, um, our body will die, and whoever we may be attached to, their body will die, and only the feeling will also go away. Everything is on a mental level. We are temporary and dead, they are temporary and dead. Everything will go on. And the human life is wasted. Human form of life is wasted in that. And that's why it's an illusion. Human form of life is wasted. Looks real, looks something tangible. There are false promise of Maya, but the time is gone, wasted. And then again, there are 8.4 million species. So the Vedic civilization, being based on spiritual understanding, arranges association with women very cautiously. Out of the four social divisions, the members of the first order, namely Brahmacharya, the third order Vanaprastha, and the fourth order Sannyas, are strictly prohibited from female association. Only Grahasthas are allowed to associate with women freely, freely also with restriction. And why they are restriction? Because it's very easy to become attached. Only in one order the householder is there licensed to mix with women under restricted condition, which is either man or woman, doesn't matter. In other words, attraction for women's association is the cause of the material conditional life. And anyone interested in being freed from this conditional life must detach himself from the association of women. If association of women is unable to give up, there is Grahasthashram, that also with restriction. There is no free mixing with opposite sex in the entire Vedic culture. Um, so one should always be careful, and I will end with this. Just whenever there is any attachment, if there is an attachment to one particular form, cut off the complete association out of sight, out of mind. But if we let the communication go, the attachment will become stronger. There is no joy that comes from it other than some mental joy. But the suffering when things break is very immense. The nature of this word, this mic word, illusory word is pleasure is very limited, but there is a lot of pain, there is a lot of anxiety. And then how can we remember Krishna? Then all those thoughts will come. One cannot sleep properly, one is filled with fear, um, anticipation, and anxiety. The life becomes very um, unstable, and it is also said one loses one's good quality. But the association between men and women, keeping Krishna in the center, no problem. There are examples in our like Nityananda Prabhu was married, Advaita Acharya was married, Shivas Thakur was married, Srila Prabhupada was married. There are examples. If men and women, they both are focused on cultivating their Krishna consciousness, and they are not trying to, or they are avoiding avoiding free association with opposite sex outside the ashram, and seriously cultivating association with Krishna, very nice. But the moment there is danger, one should be careful. And one should immediately take the thought and think of Krishna. If we are not careful in the beginning, at the end it will cause a lot of problems. So it is said, better be cautious, better be careful than feeling sorry later. Uh, yeah, so that's all I have. If anybody has any discussion, we can. Anybody want to say anything?
Krishna Prabhuji, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
The Lord Pranam. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I have a question with,
Mm.
so this puts us, the women, at a very hard spot with being not able to ask or reach out to sannyasis or Prabhujis for any inquiries. How do we approach?
Yeah, I mean, not really inquiries, Mataji. I mean, I see whether it is men or women, question answers are there. And um, generally, caution is there in the scripture. The caution is there for prajalpa, for free mixing, for mixing outside of Krishna conscious zone, or whether it is texting without a purpose, calling without a purpose. So there is always a restriction. Only for the need basis associate. Even Narad Muni says, for the sake of service we can do. But otherwise, whether man or woman, if our heart is not pure, there is an example of butter and fire. So this is very much needed in the society, Mataji. Otherwise, how will the society maintain the purity?
So we can approach for Krishna conscious questions. All
Yeah,
the yeah, he's
it
okay.
happens all the time. There are Bhakti Diksha members. There is husband wife approach together, and there is lot of discussion. All the ladies they ask question. Even gents ask question to ladies. Like Malki Prabhu comes, so ladies ask question to gents, and there is it's just in a Krishna conscious zone.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Anything else? Anyone else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, Jai Sri
Then
Prabhupada.
Krishna.
Prabhuji, my question was like, in the starting, you mentioned that whenever we get attached to some material thing, we should always remember Krishna. So, in that context, like, what kind of meditation we should have? Like, which will help more? Like, shall we just try to recollect the form of Krishna in our mind, or of his particular qualities related to that thing, or any particular verse, which will be more beneficial in that
Well,
context?
it's a personal choice. Some people remember Nitai. Some people remember Gaura. Some, like Prabhupada says, remember the lotus feet of Krishna. You can remember, just close your eyes, and when the mind is contemplating on something of this world, which is temporary by nature, we can close our mind and think of any, whether Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, Gurudev, Krishna, Radharani, and just fix your mind on that. And that will help develop attachment to Krishna. Just try to contemplate more on Krishna. Try to remember Krishna. Krishna says, always remember me, never forget me. It is like millions of miles away, that quotation of always remember me, never forget me. Man mana bharna bhakto. But little effort can be there. And especially if we realize that I'm in the danger zone, then there should be a specific extra effort to think of Krishna, to come out of that contamination. Contamination, this is all contamination in the mind. We have to purify the contamination by bringing Krishna in the center. Is it all right, Mantari?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Actually, sometimes I try to meditate on the form, but because of my contaminated state, like after some time, I again come back to those thoughts. So I'm like
That's
trying
okay.
to, yeah.
It's a training. You think for 1 minute a day, that is great. You think for 5 minutes a day, that is great. Prabhupada says the name is not different. You start chanting, close the mind and start chanting holy name of Krishna without thinking anything. Non-different from Krishna. Prabhupada said that is the most practical way to think of Krishna. Anything works has to be Krishna centered. It will purify the contamination of the mind.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Okay, we'll end here. Vanchakalpatarubhesha kripasintuvevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavito namo namaha. If I spoke anything wrong or hurted anybody, please forgive me as a humble servant. Thank you very much for joining. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank
Hare
you.
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji, thank you so